And welcome back. I'm Julia Manchester, political reporter at The Hill, and thank you for joining us for our second session of the Sustainability Imperative, our two-day virtual festival on all things sustainability. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Environmental Defense Fund, for its support of today's event. Over the next half an hour, we are going to be indulging in some trash talk, but no gossip here. Just serious but lively conversations on consumption, waste, and recycling. Between product packaging, food leftovers, and keeping up with trends in clothing, so much of what we buy and consume creates waste. How can we reduce our consumption and our carbon footprint in the process? Where can we repurpose and reimagine the lifespan of a product? We will put these questions and more to our speakers this hour. But before we get underway, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillSustainability. We are broadcasting live and we will be taking your questions throughout the program. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. That should be a quick fix. My first guest is Abhi Ramesh, founder and CEO of Misfits Market, a direct-to-consumer online grocery marketplace that works directly with farmers and producers to rescue food that would otherwise go to waste. Since Abhi founded Misfits Market, the company has saved over 230 million pounds of food. That is huge, and welcome, Abhi.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, so, just to start off with, tell us more about Misfits Market and really how this idea came about.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, we are an online grocery store. We're a little bit different from most other online grocery stores you've probably heard of or used. We serve a very unique purpose. We go and we purchase food items that otherwise probably would have gone to waste and various parts of the food supply chain for a bunch of different reasons that we think are kind of ridiculous. So, when you walk in the grocery store, you go to the produce section, you look at apples sitting there, usually you see these like perfect spherical round apples that are very shiny, and that's all you see. In reality, when the farmer grows organic apples, there are, it's a very large chunk of the harvest isn't perfect and circular and shiny. And those apples currently don't make it to market through traditional retail outlets. So what we go and partner with those farmers and growers. We purchase the sort of misfit crop that currently wouldn't get sold to retail channels. We bring it into our fulfillment centers. We ship it directly to people's doorsteps at a meaningful discount to retail prices. And since launch, to your point, we've saved about 230 million pounds of food. We've expanded the platform quite a bit beyond just fresh produce today. So now we have meat and seafood, dairy, bakery, dry grocery staples. It's basically a full grocery store online, and we're using inefficiency in the food system to drive value to the end consumer.
So why is so much food wasted? I can speak to this as an individual consumer and, understanding how individual consumers themselves or households end up wasting food. But when you look at the large scale, so wasting food in restaurants, for example, or grocery stores, why is so much put to waste?
So, I think the challenge is that waste is sort of, unfortunately, it's built structurally into the way that a lot of these industries operate and the way the consumer thinks about things as well. And, one thing that we're spending a lot of time doing is educating the modern consumer about food waste, right? When people first think about food waste, they think about a pile of food sitting in a landfill going bad. What they don't think about is maybe an apple that was a little bit too small, that doesn't make it to retail outlets, that's waste. They don't think about leafy greens that may be slightly discolored and so they don't go to market. They don't think about salmon fillets that are 3.5 ounces instead of 5 ounces, so they don't get brought to market. So yeah, I'd say the broad reason is that waste is sort of built structurally into a lot of industries. We tend to overproduce, overharvest. We tend to overbuy as well, right? I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of this. I know I am, where I'll go to the grocery store, I'll buy way more than I need for the week. I'll fill up my refrigerator. And then at the end of the week, I realize, oh no, there's a bunch of stuff in here that I didn't plan to use and it's going bad and I have to throw it out. So I think the challenge is that this idea of overproduction, overdemand, overconsumption is sort of built into a lot of parts of the food ecosystem. And we have to be very deliberate and intentional about pulling it out now.
Talk about your relationship with some of these farmers that you work with. I mean, I imagine that it's difficult for some maybe smaller scale farmers to keep up with the demand for food that some of these larger grocery store chains are, demanding essentially. And, I understand that farmers are also impacted by climate change, which obviously comes into this equation. What's that relationship like?
Well, one, it's been incredibly rewarding over the past, 4 years to have partnered with, the dozens and dozens of farmers across the U.S. And we work with a variety of growers and producers. We work with large farms, we work with medium-sized farms, we work with pretty small farms as well. And when we first launched Misfits, I would drive out to these small family farms in rural Pennsylvania and purchase basically the misfit produce from them and bring it to our fulfillment center and pack them in the boxes. And so have learned a lot about the industry through doing this. I would say first and foremost, we pride ourselves on being incredibly producer, farmer, grower friendly. I think one of the challenges that farmers have faced in the US is, on the other side, on the buying side, there are these massive retailers and huge CPG companies or food companies they have to work with. And a lot of times they're, for lack of a better word, kind of bullied by these larger companies and forced to adhere to very strict standards on what they can grow, forced to adhere to strict standards on what they can send to a lot of these retailers. We stepped in there and said, hey, there must be another way of thinking about this relationship, one that is a lot more conducive to collaboration, one that's more farmer friendly. And so the way we work with farmers and producers is it's a two-way relationship. We walk up to them and say, hey, what do you have available? What do you grow and produce that you currently can't sell to market for whatever reason? And how can we help enable you to sell that? And how do we go buy a lot of this product from you? So it's a collaborative relationship. It's one that we've really enjoyed developing over the past 4 years.
And since you started Misfit Market, have you seen any progress with how, your own community or maybe how this country overall impacts approaches the issue of waste?
Definitely. I'd say even over the past few years, I think we've seen a massive structural shift towards consumers just caring about food waste, about sustainability, about their carbon footprint, about how much water is used in the food that they buy from the grocery store and eat. And I think that trend's going to continue, right? I think this idea of the conscious consumer, the conscious shopper that isn't just buying brands because they're brands, isn't just buying for price. They actually, they care about what's under the hood. They care about how it's produced. They care about the labor practices at the farms that food was grown and produced. And we've seen that. We've seen customers ask us. They'll say, "Hey, I got this in my box. Can you tell me this story? Can you tell me about this farmer? Can you tell me about this CPG brand and why you're carrying it?" I think the understanding the why has become so much more important for the modern consumer, and I just believe that trend's going to continue. The other side of it is I think that a lot of big food manufacturers and retailers are going to have to adapt as well, because I think that the consumer is demanding a lot more transparency around their food purchases. And I just believe that both manufacturers and retailers they're starting to change, but I think they're going to have to change a lot more.
I think a lot of healthy brands, health foods, for example, they get a reputation of being very expensive. And I think there's a lot of questions as to, okay, how can I eat more naturally, eat more sustainably, but also budget? And I think there's some questions as to how low-income communities can do this as well and how they can get access to this. How is food waste related, I guess, to this problem? Because I would assume that if everyone was eating a more sustainable, natural diet, across all income brackets, we may not have as much waste.
100%. We have 3 internal pillars at Misfits Market that we always talk about. They are sustainability, affordability, and accessibility. And what's interesting is sustainability is fundamentally linked to accessibility and affordability the way we think about it. And essentially by tackling food waste and tackling food inefficiency in the supply chain, we are able to deliver dollar value to the end customer and basically provide them with staple groceries for 30-40% cheaper than if they were to go drive to the grocery store. And the reason that value exists is because of the sustainability mission. And so, the thing I like to say is it's not sustainability or affordability for us. It's sustainability that drives affordability. And I think to your point, it is very different from the older school way of thinking about sustainability, where historically, to be part of a sustainable brand, the consumers had to pay a premium, a pretty meaningful premium too, to be part of that. And I think that's shifting as well. And I think companies like ours, there's others out there too, that are using sustainable practices to drive affordability and value towards the end consumer. And the other thing I'll point out is on accessibility, we think there is a huge opportunity to bring healthy eating and online grocery to the rest of the country that isn't in the dense metropolitan areas that already have a ton of access. I think one of the things we talk about a lot is, if you live in New York City, San Francisco, LA, you have a lot of options for healthy food and grocery delivery. But if you live anywhere else in the US, suburbs, a lot of the more rural areas, the options are harder to come by. And so one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on is essentially building out the logistics networks to get out to these more rural markets where fresh, healthy food just wasn't found before. And so that's a really important part of our accessibility mission.
Absolutely. Well, Avi Ramesh, thank you so much for your insight on this. For our viewers, you can check out his company, Misfit Markets. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And while sustainable practices are imperative for saving the planet, some, such as recycling and composting food scraps, are not always accessible to everyone. My next guests are innovators attempting to address these accessibility issues. Ryan Smith is the founder and CEO of Recyclops, a recycling company that has diverted over 8 million pounds from landfills to date. And Monique Figueredo is the founder and co-owner and CEO of Compostable LA, which she founded after the need for additional community composting resources in the area. A big welcome to you both.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Ryan, I want to start with you. I think a lot of us who are privileged to, have access to recycling and recycle regularly, we take it for granted. I wanted to get from your take to ask how many communities would you estimate don't have access to recycling?
This is something that blows my mind. I grew up recycling and didn't realize there was an access problem at all until I moved first into an apartment. And that really was what opened my eyes to the access issue. And in doing further research, it's approximately 60% of apartments in the US don't have access to recycling. So it's somewhere around 16 million apartments. And that's actually the smaller portion of the population without access. The bigger portion is like what we were just talking about with accessibility of these outskirts of urban centers, more rural populations with Misfits Markets. Those are the populations where recycling is really lacking. That's about 34 million households that are on these outskirts of urban centers and getting into more rural. So you put the 34 million plus the 16 million apartments, and we're talking 50 million households, 38% of homes in the US that don't have access to convenient, affordable recycling collection. And that's crazy. That blows my mind.
That blows my mind too. And Monique, moving to composting, I think a lot of people who maybe aren't familiar with the environmentally friendly world, or they're learning about this process. Sometimes they see the composting bucket and then the recycling bucket, and everyone starts to get confused. Where do I put my garbage? So walk us through exactly what is composting and why it's so important.
Yeah, composting is really the oldest form of recycling. Earth has been composting since it was formed. There is no waste in natural systems. The waste of one system is really the food for another. And through composting, we're just mimicking those natural systems. And so really anything that was grown from the ground, any organic material can be composted. And so when you're trying to navigate these green bins and blue bins and black bins, you can kind of tell what goes in the green bin by that natural connection you have to our organic ecosystems.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to pose a question to you both because it seems like recycling and composting, if someone's educated about it properly, has access to it, it's something that seems pretty easy and simple to incorporate into your lifestyle, again, if they have access to it. So, Ryan, I'm going to start with you, then I want to get your take, Monique. How do we make sustainability more accessible to all?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really been amazing to me is how important simplicity and ease come into this. If it is easy to recycle, people recycle. If you have someone who just finished a water bottle and they're walking past a trash can and there's a trash can and a recycling bin, they're going to put that bottle in the recycling bin. If there's only a trash can there, maybe they'll hold on to it till they get to the next trash can and recycling bin. And if there's once again not a recycling bin, they're not holding on to that anymore. They're going to let go of it. Really accessibility for me comes down to making it easy. And what can we do to make it easy? There's so many communities that we go and operate in all over the country where there's a drop off at the park and the city has canceled the recycling program, but they're like, oh no, but we put this drop off at the park for people. And that's better than nothing, but frankly, not much, because you look at how much that is used and the rates are abysmal. You're going to, a curbside recycling program is going to get 40+x more participation than a drop off like that. And so when I look at, accessibility, it really comes down to what can we do to make this easy? What can we do to make this simple? Because the easier it is, as long as we're, being reasonable with it, then it's going to increase recycling rates and make a big impact.
Right. And Monique, would love to get your take on the same question.
Yeah, I come at this from an environmental justice standpoint, and I think accessibility means something different to every community we serve. And so the importance is creating different options and different systems that can serve different people's lifestyles. And so that, I think the most stable ecosystems, the most resilient ecosystems have diversity and redundancy. And we want to mimic those things with the composting world. So what are different options we can provide for different communities? So if someone makes a little bit more money, they can use this. If someone makes less money or has less time, they can use this. And so I think really creating diverse options for different lifestyles and different communities is incredibly important.
Ryan, I want to pose this question to you kind of on the same topic. Do you think the concept of sustainable living is a privileged concept? I mean, it seems like when, a lot of critics, when they hear sustainable, they think, oh, well, that's something for, someone who lives in a bigger urban area, has, from a relatively well-off background. Do you think privilege comes along with it?
Yeah, that's actually something that I have thought so much about, because when you look at who has access to sustainability initiatives, looking particularly at curbside recycling, who has access to curbside recycling? And it's pretty discouraging, because when you look at the populations, you're like, oh, it's mostly white suburban neighborhoods predominantly. And it's like, wait, you mean that because of someone's socioeconomic status, or because of, the color of their skin, or because of whatever, that they are less likely to have access to recycling? Like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel good. And so we have really looked at this as like, we want to democratize recycling, and the recycling deserves to be democratized. There is nothing about sustainability that is only desired by a certain subset of people. There's nothing about it. Everyone cares about the earth. And we all are living here, and creating this access for people who don't have access. Like, we've looked, one of the populations that's been so interesting for me to look at is reservations. Yeah. And looking at Native American populations and looking at their access to things like recycling. And it's almost non-existent. And then you look at the cultural heritage and the idea of using and not wasting, and it's something that's deeply ingrained in the culture. And yet the systems that have been brought into this community, and the single-use plastics, there's not a place for it, and it just isn't right. And so we've really set out to try and democratize that, because everyone should have access to sustainability initiatives, regardless of where they live.
So Monique, you're based in Los Angeles and you're obviously big into composting. What are some of the barriers to composting in a city like Los Angeles and maybe in other cities around the country?
Yeah, I think it really varies. Some people, it's like, I don't even know what to begin. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to start. Some people, they know that, but I mean, there's so many other things they're trying to tackle and take on. So it could be time, it could be money, it could be knowledge, it could be discomfort. And so this kind of goes back to having multiple options that can serve everybody who has different things they need. Maybe you love going to a local drop-off site, and that brings you a lot of meaning and joy. And so you should have that option. Or maybe, you don't have time for that, and but you do love doing stuff at home. So maybe you need a lot more resources around knowledge, systems and that kind of things. So I think barriers are really as vibrant as the communities we serve. And what we're trying to do is listen to people, hear what they have to say, and create a series of offerings, no matter what your barrier might be.
Right. And, once again, looking at this from a bigger picture, and I'll pose this to both of you again, in your opinion, do you feel that the U.S. is on the right path to combating climate change, and are Americans, doing what they can to live in a more sustainable world and ensure a sustainable future? I know it's a big question, but Ryan, I'll go to you first.
I think it's a loaded question a little bit, but no. I think two sides. One, I think there's more to do. Without a doubt, there is more to do. And are we doing enough? There's more to do. But I also think that there are things happening. The fact that my company exists, that Monique's company exists, the fact that we have customers that are supporting us, and that shows that people care. And one of the things that's most impactful to me as I've thought about this industry and researched is kind of that question of, does my individual impact matter? And the answer that I've kind of come to time and time again through different research is that your individual impact matters, not because your drop in the bucket, the one, your household's composting, your household's recycling is going to move the needle, but because you have an influence on other people. And your influence on other people, that moves the needle. Because when we all do something, that makes an impact. And we're all in this together. We're all on this earth together. There's only one earth, and we should take care of it. And we have a responsibility to take care of it. And when we all kind of come together and do this, then it makes a difference. And we are on the right path, I think, to move forward there. Work to do, but on a good path.
Monique, do you agree? Are we on the right track?
I agree. I think, a lot of the things I focus on is individual empowerment as a way to combat climate anxiety. But I really do focus too on that we have to start prioritizing people over profit, and that there needs to be a lot of pressure put on corporations to do their part. So I offer climate solutions for everyday people in everyday situations, but I never want them to feel lost and hopeless. This is an option to help with lost and hopelessness. This is an option to build community and build support. And then we can also rally around the corporations that are really the ones that are polluting the industry and our planet, and demand change. And so I put a lot of the responsibility back on them.
Before we go, and we have just about a minute left, I want to know, what's one thing someone can do, you can say recycling and composting, I can only guess, but someone can do to live a more sustainable life and give back to the earth? Ryan, I'll start with you, then go to Monique.
I would say two things. Sorry, you only asked for one. Reuse what you can reuse, and focus on that. And the second one is actually composting. Composting's like one of the most high impact things you can do. And it's really satisfying. I love composting. It's been such a fun thing for me to start doing. So those are number two.
What about you, Monique?
I mean, I love composting because how often do we get to see the full cycle of something right in front of us? But I would say change your relationship with waste. Look at waste differently. How are you relating to the products you're bringing into your life, and how do they leave your life? And so if you can just start changing your perspective around that, your actions will follow suit.
That's really interesting, and I think it's something we all should take stock of, how much we're wasting each day, each week, and hopefully we can make a difference from there. Ryan Smith, founder and CEO of Recyclops, and Monique Figueredo, founder and co-owner and CEO of Compostable LA. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Daniel Silverstein, or Zero Waste Daniel, is a New York-based clothing designer. He uses pre-consumer waste sourced from New York City's garment industry, as well as other hard-to-recycle materials to create his line of genderless clothing and accessories which do not add to landfills. I spoke to him about his sustainable fashion line just a short while ago. Take a listen.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. My first question for you is, just about your origin story. How did you get started in quote unquote trashin'? And, tell us what trashin' is.
Trashin' is, I think, open to interpretation, but first and foremost, the upcycling of anything that one person looks at as trash, as the raw material that you begin the design process with. So for me, that started with working with scraps of fabric when I was a really little kid. When I was about 5 years old, my mom would take me to a fabric store near where I grew up in Pennsylvania, and the local community, the Amish community, made their own clothing and sold their own scraps. And so I would go to this Amish fabric store and buy a brown paper bag full of scraps for like $1. And that was, to me, like going to the toy store. And I would go home and using a needle, thread, stapler, scissors, glue, anything I could get my hands on. I used to make change purses, doll clothes, pillows, decorations. And then as I became a professional designer studying design, I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology here in New York City. And I saw people throwing away this material. I knew instinctually from my childhood that this was a missed opportunity. So I began experimenting with different approaches of zero waste design, some of them, like the piece I'm wearing today, including and incorporating scraps.
Right. And, when you incorporate scraps into fashion, it's such a unique thing that you do. And I think oftentimes when we're talking about sustainability in fashion, you hear a lot about fast fashion and why we should try to move away from fast fashion. In terms of amplifying trashin', how is that going? And, what are you doing to amplify that?
Well, the movement of sustainability across many different industries is apparent. You see it in commercials from cleaning products to energy to all different types of industries. And so what I'm doing to amplify that is putting it out there. It's making it look possible, making it look fun, making it look easy. And for people who are not going to engage on a craft or design level, making it easy to engage as a consumer. So for me, one of the things that I like to do is say, the clothing costs money, but information and inspiration are free. And I put those out on my social media all the time. And I even have a podcast talking about sustainability called This Is Not Sustainable. And what we do is we talk with, my co-host and I talk with people outside of the realm of sustainability about how sustainability interacts with their lives. Because I think inside the world of talking about trash and about zero waste, about sustainability, everyone who's having that conversation already knows and cares. So how do we reach people, like you said, and amplify? And I think it's through touch points that feel more relatable and entertaining and attainable than some of the scary statistics and realities that we're all sort of facing.
Right. And speaking of scary statistics, I would love to hear, and I think our viewers would like to hear, about the scale of fabric dumping and general waste that occurs in the fashion industry. Could you give us a sense of, how big of an issue it is in the industry?
So one of the things that I can say is that every brand has waste. So whether it's a clothing company, a furniture company, any kind of store, it's packaging waste, but also when you go back to how those products are made, all the way back to the offices that they're designed in, those rooms all have prototypes, sample materials, and design room waste that accumulates. So even inherently in the creative process, there's always something being left over or left behind. And what I'm trying to do is focus on those materials, the hard to recycle materials, and figure out how we can find a way of working with them. What's interesting is that in the private sector, where clothing can make the most change the most quickly, is hard to regulate how much waste there really is. So there have been many different studies done, but the city, I'm in New York, I'm in Brooklyn, the city has a hard time counting exactly how much of what is being thrown out because the waste industry is privatized. And over a certain amount of waste coming out of these commercial buildings is all done B2B from the company to the courier. So it's hard to say exactly how much is being thrown away. We know that in New York, as of I think 2014, more than 70 times the amount of material that's coming out of the domestic end of things is coming from the commercial end of the industry. So what I assume is that we know people are throwing away old clothes, old linens, old towels, but the factories getting rid of materials that are going into production is exponentially more.
And, you know, in terms of your own brand and your own products that you make, I mean, you have such a unique outlook on how to create these pieces of clothing, and it seems like you've stayed incredibly disciplined. But in an industry, at least to an outsider like myself, has it been difficult to stay disciplined and to keep sustainability? Because it seems like some of the, I should say, Main Street brands, I don't know, I mean, I don't have data in front of me, but I don't think they're known for being sustainable the same way as maybe some other brands would be.
Sure. So I think that for me, that part of that discipline is being transparent, and I can't be everything. It's impossible to have a silver bullet for fixing sustainability. What I say and have said before is that if we really want to figure out how to solve all the world's problems and live perfectly sustainably, all of the answers are out there. They're in textbooks about medieval history and how indigenous people around the world have been living for centuries. But until we're ready to really make that commitment and make that sacrifice, we have to look at how we're going to prioritize. And waste and landfills are one of the things that accelerate climate change the fastest. They're known for producing harmful gas because they're not good environments for materials to break down organically and naturally. So what my business does is focus on keeping things that contribute to those negative solutions out of landfills. And a lot of times, rather than landfilling items, things in the fashion industry, because they're proprietary and designers put all this work into their designs, they actually incinerate their designs, which also contributes to the harmful off-gassing. So for me, putting that as the first priority of the mission of my brand helps me move along and make progress without getting hung up on having every single thing be perfectly sustainable, because I don't think that today that's achievable yet. I do think with more people thinking that way and each picking one priority, we are moving towards more sustainable solutions being more readily available to companies and consumers alike.
Yeah, and on that note about companies, what can some of these larger fast fashion or non-fast fashion companies do to enhance sustainability? I mean, it seems like I go on online shopping and I always see something on a fashion website that says sustainable. So it seems like it's becoming much more mainstream, but what can they do to take it to the next level?
So I think it's twofold. One is that transparency element. So you can't just say it, you have to be able to show, and we all love the social media. Show us the video, show us a TikTok, show us a reel about how it is sustainable. And the other side is to go on those platforms like TikTok and Instagram and find designers like myself and put them in charge at companies like that. Because until we are able to say sustainability is one of our metrics of success, we're never really going to do it. So you need to find people who believe in it and put them at the helm, put them in charge, and show how not only can you make good ethical decisions and smart ethical decisions, but a lot of times they have huge advantages to the business. Having low materials costs is a great advantage of being zero waste.
It's such a fascinating concept, especially for millennials who have become so accustomed to this idea of, fast fashion or fashion that maybe isn't so sustainably produced, but we're so interested in being sustainable. So Daniel, I thank you so much for all of your insight on this. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
The minimalists Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus are on a mission to live meaningful lives with less and are helping others do the same through their website, books, podcasts, and Netflix film. I spoke with Joshua Fields Milburn about one of the minimalists, I should say, about reducing individual consumption and living simpler. Here's our conversation.
Josh, thank you so much for joining me. First question, and I want our viewers to know there is an entire documentary on Netflix where they can find out more about the minimalists and the lifestyle. But for people who may not know, who are tuning in right now, how did you get started on this journey? And, what exactly is minimalism?
Well, minimalism is the thing that gets us past the things so we can make room for life's most important things, which turns out aren't things at all. You asked about how we got started. It was about a dozen years ago. Two unfortunate events, actually. I had sort of living the American dream. I had everything I ever wanted. I grew up really poor and thought the answer to happiness must be accumulation. The right job title, the right amount of stuff, the luxury car, the big suburban house with more toilets than people. I had sort of all the trappings of our consumerist culture, right? And so I was living the American dream ostensibly, but it turns out it wasn't really my dream. And it took two events to really uncover that fact. The first thing that happened is my mom died right as I was getting ready to approach age 30, and then my marriage ended. And both of those things happened in the same month. And those two events really forced me to look around and start to question what had become my life's focus. And I realized I was so focused on all the wrong stuff, all the success and achievement and the trophies and the status symbols. And in our culture, it has a lot to do with the accumulation of stuff. The average American household has 300,000 items in it. And that'd be wonderful if it was making us more joyous and happy and content and complete. But of course, we all know that it's doing the opposite. With all of those things comes a lot of stress and debt and anxiety and discontent. And so as I started looking around and questioning everything in my life, I realized I really needed to simplify. I had complexed my life so much. I had built this complex life, interwoven so many unnecessary obligations and trinkets and material possessions and relationships and career obligations. There was a lot of clutter in my life. And it started with the material possessions in my life. But those material possessions were just a physical manifestation of what was going on inside me. Yes, I had a lot of external clutter for sure, but I also had a lot of internal clutter, mental clutter, spiritual clutter, career clutter, relationship clutter, a lot of clutter in my life that I had to start dealing with.
Right. And, living in America and really in the Western world in general, there is this obsession or this cultural norm of consumerism and, buying things, collecting stuff, as you say. Why is this so prevalent in our culture? And, I've noticed a trend, and it seems that as, the digital world expands, really, gosh, you can go on TikTok and there is so much advertising, for example, there. Everywhere you go, there is an advertisement. Would love to hear your take on the link between that and how that impacts us buying and collecting material items.
What a great observation. Yeah, we see upwards of 10,000 advertisements a day. According to Forbes, it's somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000, depending on where you live and the per pervasiveness. But regardless, if you see 4,000 advertisements a day, what is their main job? It's to sell you something. Well, how do you sell someone something? By making them feel incomplete. And that's exactly what consumerism does. It promises something that can't be delivered. Consumerism is the ideology that buying things will make you happy or complete. But of course, we get the things that we want. We get that thing we always desired, but the object of our desire soon becomes the object of our discontent, right? So there's the price tag. We buy a thing, we buy some phone or gadget or whatever for $100, and that's the first price. But the second price is really all of the additional costs we don't think about at the point of purchase. There's the cost of storing the thing and maintaining the thing and charging the thing and watering the thing and replacing the batteries in the thing and fixing the thing, worrying about the thing, protecting the thing. There's a lot of costs that go into every single thing that we buy, and we literally can't afford it. The average household in America has $97,775 in non-mortgage debt. That's credit card debt, student debt, car debt. And so we buy a lot of things. There's nothing wrong with the stuff. Consumption isn't the problem. The problem is compulsory consumption, consumerism, thinking that those things are going to make us better or more complete. Now, it's true. Some of our material possessions will augment our life. They'll enhance our life. Ryan and I, as the minimalists, we're not against stuff. We're against unintentional consumption. We're against buying things because we think it's going to make us happy when a lot of those things are actually making us miserable.
And I heard you talk about the psychological aspect of that and, you know, what it means to accumulate all this stuff that you might not necessarily need. But it seems like there's also a big environmental impact that's very negative when it comes to this compulsory consumption. In my mind, the first thing that comes to mind is fast fashion and going to a cheaper clothing store to buy a, you know, dress or a pair of jeans that's only going to last maybe one or two wears, and then you throw it out. You know, would love to hear more about what you think minimalism, how it could benefit the environment, you know, and really our global ecosystem going forward.
You know, it wasn't one of the initial benefits for me, environmentalism, but then I realized as I consume less, what happens? I produce less waste naturally. And so because I consume about 90% less than I used to, I'm also producing about 90% less waste. And what a beautiful benefit that is. Now, I noticed a bunch of other benefits as well. Yes, it helped me with my finances. It helped me live within my means. My relationships improved because I decluttered sort of toxic relationships from my life. And so there are all these beautiful, unexpected benefits of minimalism, and environmentalism is certainly one of them. I will tell you that you're right. We live in a bit of a disposable culture. I'll just buy it today. I'll throw it away this afternoon. Single-use plastics, and now we have single-use t-shirts and single-use pants. And unfortunately, when we are constantly consuming, we're in that cycle of consumption, we don't think about the actual costs to us and the environment when we're in that frenzy of consumerism.
Right. And, you know, final question. What can a first-time minimalist or someone who's, you know, early in their journey to minimalism do? I know that, you know, we were chatting before this. I saw the documentary and I was, you know, saying I was feeling light because I just moved, got rid of some things. But then I think of the prospect of getting rid of one or two items each day and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get rid of all of my stuff. How am I going to live like this? Yeah. What's some advice you could give to someone beginning their journey?
I got three things for you. First off, it starts with a question. So this isn't a tip on how to do something. It's more of a why. And that question is, how might your life be better with less? And the reason that question's so important is the answer is different for everyone. So your version of simplifying, of simple living, of living with less is going to look different from your neighbor or the person across the street or someone around the world. And so understanding the benefits of simplifying will give you that momentum you need to finally get started. What are the benefits? Because honestly, we know decluttering can be a bit boring. And so Ryan and I, we came up with something called the 30-day minimalism game. This is my second second tip for you. And here's how it works. You can find all the details. In fact, you can download a free calendar at theminimalists.com/game. But you can print out that calendar and you can play with a friend or a family member. Because decluttering is a little boring, we found a way to make it fun with some friendly competition. Here's how it works. At the beginning of the month, you partner up with someone, a friend, a family member, a coworker. You both decide we're going to get rid of some stuff this month. First day of the month, you each get rid of 1 item. Second day of the month, 2 items. Third day of the month, 3 items, so forth and so on. It starts off really easy, get you that momentum you need to let go, because you might look around your house and say, how am I going to deal with all of this excess stuff? But as soon as you get that momentum, you start feeling freer and lighter and happier. And the next day, you're like, oh my goodness, I have to get rid of 4 things today. No problem. But by day 15, you're like, oh my goodness, I have to get rid of 15 items a day, and then I have to get rid of 16 items tomorrow. And it gets more difficult as the month progresses. Whoever goes the longest wins. And if you both make it to the end of the month, then you've both won, because you've gotten rid of about 500 items. And that's a really good start. And the third thing I'd say is we have this minimalist rule book, 16 rules for living with less. It's completely free on our website at theminimalists.com. It's right there at the top. And it's setting up not rules in your life, but boundaries. So I'll give you a few examples there. One is called the Seasonality Rule. We also refer to it as the 90-90 rule. Pick up any item in your house. Have I used this in the last 90 days? If not, am I going to use it in the next 90 days? And if not, then I give myself permission to let go. If I have used it, then great. It's adding value to my life. I don't want to get rid of it. A couple more rules. One is called the just-in-case rule. We also refer to it as a 20-20 rule. We hold on to so many items just in case we might need them someday in some non-existent hypothetical future. I'll keep this just in case, this old cable just in case, this old box just in case. But what we've learned is that any just-in-case item we can let go of, because it can be replaced for less than $20 and less than 20 minutes from wherever you are. And the cool thing about that rule is you never end up having to use it. I've had to use it fewer than 5 times in the last 10 years. And so it gave me permission to let go of tens of thousands of other just-in-case items. One final rule for you. We call it the no junk rule. Everything you own can fit in one of 3 piles. It's either essential, it's non-essential but value-adding, or it's junk. Now, we all have the same essentials: food, clothing, shelter, etc. And so if I own something that is essential, I don't want to get rid of it. The next category is something that adds value to my life. It's non-essential. Yes, I could live without a couch or a coffee table, but those things add value to my life. No reason to get rid of those things. Unfortunately, most of the things we own fit in that junk pile. Those things that don't actually add value to our lives, and they get in the way. And as soon as we identify something as junk, it's so much easier to let go.
Well, Josh, after this, I'm going to see if my colleagues and my team at the Hill will want to play that game with me. We'll see how long each of us lasts. Thank you so much for your time. And just a reminder to our viewers, The Minimalist is on Netflix as well. And Josh and his friend Ryan are doing a North America tour right now, talking about, their journey on minimalism. Josh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of day 1 of the Sustainability Imperative. A big thank you to the Environmental Defense Fund for its support, and to all of you for watching. For those of you who missed any of these conversations, this afternoon we will have a video from the event up on our website shortly. We will be back tomorrow with more important conversations on sustainability, including a discussion with actress Sigourney Weaver and U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. You won't want to miss it. Until then, I'm Julia Manchester.